UFC Fight Night, Amanda Lemos versus Virna Jandiroba is coming up this weekend, and in this video I'm going to be giving you my predictions and breakdown for every single fight on the card and giving you my predictions for all the best moments on the card. Kicking it off with the first fight of Mohammad Usman versus Thomas Petersen. So before we get into the prediction, I will say this is probably the worst fight night overall on paper that we've had so far this year. But with this fight kicking it off, I'll say that this is probably one of the more decent ones that we're actually going to be able to see, and I think it'll be pretty close. Obviously, a lot of people are probably on Mohammad Usman because Kamaru Usman is his brother. But Thomas Petersen, watching him on the regional scene, he's pretty well-rounded, and he's got a good boxing base. He's got good single legs as well, good single leg entries. And on Dana White's Contender Series, he did land a key lock submission as well. So he has got threats from pretty much everywhere. So I definitely wouldn't be counting him out in this fight. But I will say, when I watched him against Jamal Poe, he struggles very badly with his head movement, and it's mainly against those quicker guys, which, as much as you probably wouldn't believe looking at Jamal Pogues, I mean, he actually is pretty quick with his hands. Thomas Petersen is also not the greatest on the back foot either, and that's really why I'm going to be giving Mo Usman the decision here, and there are a few more reasons as to why as well. And that's because Mo Usman, firstly, he's fought the better competition over Thomas Petersen. And even though Usman isn't the most technical on the feet, he's got the hand speed there, and he's got very aggressive. So he can push the pace, and I think he would be able to do a good job of putting Thomas Petersen on the back foot when it's needed. And he also does have the wrestling base and the wrestling background. I mean, if you're brothers with Kamaru Usman, you're obviously going to have that there regardless. And plus, he was a pro footballer beforehand. So, yeah, he's definitely got that wrestling base there and that aggression especially. And even though Petersen's head movement is pretty shit, he does have a pretty good chin. So that's why I've taken Usman by the decision here. And Usman doesn't really set himself up for the KO shots so much. I think it's also down to a technique point as well, that he just doesn't really follow through with his shots to the point where he's going to generate a heap of power on them. I feel like if he was able to get the technique down pat, he would be able to destroy so many people. But yeah, he's more of an actual point fighting style fighter, realistically, looking through most of his fights that we've seen, except for the tough finale. But aside from that, yeah, he's pretty much just points fight on the feet. But I think Usman will do a good job of pressuring him on the back foot, and he's got a 5-inch reach advantage there. So those straight shots, if he's able to utilize those, I think that, along with his speed and that pressure, I think that he'll just be able to take the fight overall on volume and damage. Moving up to Luana Carolina versus Lucie Pudilova. So, kicking off with the bad fights. Luana, I'll start with Luana. I mean, she's a wild card. She's definitely a wild card. I mean, she's moving up in weight from flyweight to bantamweight in this fight, so it makes it even more difficult to predict. But she's a wild card when it comes to her performances. She's on a 2-fight win streak at the moment, and she beat Lupe Godinez, who is one of the best in the division, but then goes out there and gets chinned by Molly McCann, and then KOs Stoliarenko, who submitted Molly McCann not too long beforehand. So the MMA math isn't mathing with this one, and pretty much throughout her entire career, it's just not mathing. So it doesn't make it easy. And when it comes to her style, I mean, I don't think she's great really anywhere, to be honest. I don't think she's great in any specific area. I mean, she's got a bit of power there. She's got a couple KOs on her side. I mean, she's 3-1 when it comes to the KO TKOs, but I will say, aside from that, her submission defense isn't terrible. I mean, she's looked somewhat decent on the ground when it comes to making sure she doesn't get into those dangerous positions, but looking at Pudilova, I mean, yes, she's on a 2-fight loss streak at the moment. She's gone 1-2 in the UFC so far, but I think I'm liking her more in this matchup, to be honest. It's mainly down to it being her natural weight class, whereas obviously we've got Carolina moving up in weight, and her striking, mainly her striking, just looks cleaner in comparison to Carolina's, which I think is the key in this fight. And she sets up her takedowns very well, especially the double legs, and Carolina Carolina doesn't have the greatest takedown defense. So I do see Pudilova giving Carolina trouble in top control, and I think she'll just land the cleaner shots with the boxing overall on the feet. So I'm going to take her by a decision win here. I don't see a KO, TKO, or a submission really happening. I think it's going to be a pretty boring fight, but yeah, I think Pudilova will do a good job in terms of the hand speed and just the accuracy overall on the feet. And then if she needs to shoot for a double leg, I think she'll get it there. So yeah, unanimous decision for Lucie Pudilova. Moving up the card, Loik Radzhabov versus Trey Ogden. Okay, so Radzhabov, he is fairly inconsistent in his career. He's between the PFL and the UFC in like the later half of his career, he's gone 6-5 in his fights. But you can't take away the finishing capabilities from him. He's finished 13 out of 18 of his wins, and he's actually only ever been finished once. So he's lost all those other fights by decision. He's only lost once by KO, TKO. So yeah, he's got the durability there, and he does have the KO and submission threat. And then when we look at Ogden, Trey Ogden is just such a weird fighter to analyze. He's 0-0 when it comes to KOs, but he's fought very tough fighters in terms of fighters that are fast, good at striking, have good KO power as well. I mean, he's fought Ignacio Bahamondes, he's fought Daniel Zellhuber as well, and he hasn't been knocked out, so his defense is pretty good. And he's got 11 submissions, and he has lost half of his losses are by submission, so it's by far his best game, but he's also compromisable there as well, which makes it so strange. And all 3 of those losses are by choke, which when we look at Radzhabov, he has a very diverse submission game, especially with those chokes. He's won by like rear naked chokes, guillotines, anacondas. He's won by north-south chokes as well. I think he's got 2 of those in his career, and he has a very aggressive wrestling style as well. So ultimately, I do believe that Ogden will probably steal the first round with the distance management, because when he's on the feet, he has a good jab, he has good kicks as well. But when it comes to Radzhabov, I'm going to say that I think with his diverse range of tools, I do see him taking the decision win here. I think he's just going to frustrate Ogden within the fight. I think it's just going to frustrate him with the takedown output, with the wrestling, and especially with the sheer amount of control time that he's going to be able to get, and with those threats, with those submissions. I think he's just going to really drag out the clock, and I think he's going to take the decision win in this one. Moving on, Miranda Maverick versus Dione Barbosa. So this is a pretty quick turnaround for Barbosa. She fought like 2-3 months ago against Carrot Skater, which I think she lost. She won a split decision, but Carrot Skater was outlanding her, was doing a good job of the get-ups as well. Barbosa couldn't hold her down and pull off a submission, which is probably the only part of her game that's actually pretty decent from what I've seen. And she's coming into this fight against Miranda Maverick, who has fought a much better quality of opposition overall. Maverick has only lost to now ranked opposition. And I will say, aside from Barbosa's like actual submission threat, I don't think there's anything that Miranda Maverick is really having to worry about in this fight. I mean, she's just got way more experience. She's fought a lot tougher opponents than Dione Barbosa. And I feel like this is a fight just to really get Miranda Maverick back on track. And I will say, like, when we look at the striking, it's pretty clear difference in terms of Miranda Maverick being the advanced fighter here overall. I mean, she has only finished, she's 1-0 with KO TKOs, so she doesn't have the KO threat there, but she's got the higher volume on the feet, and she does have a Muay Thai base, so she's not too bad with her kicks. And she's pretty decent when it comes to her boxing and that accuracy overall, and just that output in general. So I do see Miranda Maverick just getting this one by a unanimous decision win, 30-27. Only way I see Barbosa winning is if she somehow is able to get Maverick in a position where she can secure that submission win. But Maverick's 8-0 with submissions and is pretty defensively sound, especially when it comes to the grappling. And when someone is on the submission offense, her defense pretty much has always held up, being 8-0. So yeah, I'm very confident that Miranda Maverick's going to get the decision win here. Moving up to Brian Kelleher versus Cody Gibson. So when we look at Brian, he has had a pretty consistent UFC career. I mean, just in terms of like longevity's sake, he's been there for like 7 to 8 years now. But unfortunately, anyone that he faces that is at least somewhat notable, he pretty much always gets finished by them. And he's not getting any younger now. I mean, he's 37 years old, and he's in his last 3 fights, he got subbed by Usman Nurmagomedov, he got submitted by Mario Bautista, and then he just got chinned by Cody Garbrandt as well, which was at the end of last year. And when we look at him against Cody Gibson, yes, Cody Gibson isn't like the best of the best. He's not the best fighter, but in terms of recent form, in terms of the fight, just not even his actual results, it's more so the performances that he's had within those fights. Even though he's lost, he has looked very good. He's looked very game. I mean, Gibson, he doesn't have like the greatest submission defense, but he is so durable. I mean, he's never been finished on the feet. He's 7-0 on the feet, and it's just that overall form. He's just shown a better version of himself in the octagon recently than Brian Kelleher has in his fights, and he just gives more in the fight than Kelleher offers as well. So I think when we look at Gibson on the feet, especially statistically, he's just better everywhere. I mean, he's got the output advantage, accuracy advantage, he absorbs less strikes than Kelleher as well, and he has a 5-inch reach advantage. Kelleher does not have a big reach at all. And honestly, I see Gibson hurting Kelleher on the feet, and then I think once he hurts him on the feet, I think he's going to get it to the ground, and I think he's going to find a submission, and I think he's going to find a choke of some kind, possibly an arm triangle, maybe a rear naked choke. And then I think from there, yeah, I think it's done. I think he's going to get it in the 2nd or the 3rd round. Now, moving on to the feature prelim, this is where we're getting a little bit better. JeongYeong Lee versus Hyder Amil. So these guys, both durable. Both have never been finished. And when we look at Amil, he had a very impressive debut against Fernie Garcia. He showed like relentless pressure. He was on the gas pretty much the entire time. Good wrestling, very strong, good reversals whenever Fernie was able to take his back. I think he got his back taken twice, pretty much reversed it straight away. And he has the submission threat there as well. He had the submission threat there in that fight too. He was very aggressive when it came to those attempts. And of course, probably the biggest thing is when it comes to his strike. I mean, he dropped Fernie Garcia like 5 times in the 1st round, and then dropped him even more. I don't know what the hell Garcia's chin is made of. It was ridiculous. I don't know how the hell he did not get him out of there. I thought by the point when it came to towards the end of the 1st round, I was like, if Amil gasses, Garcia could possibly come back. But that's the thing, Amil just kept pushing. He did not gas at all, so he was very, very good on the endurance side of things, and he's got the power for sure. I just think it came down to Fernie's chin just being indestructible at that point. And his boxing, he's got pretty clean boxing. He has got nice rips to the body as well, and yeah, he just did not really slow down. And that, yeah, he's pretty impressive overall. I'd say he's fairly well rounded. He's just got threats everywhere. But even though I've just said all that, Lee, I think with his speed, I think that is probably what's going to make the difference in this fight. And if I'm Amil in this fight, basing off Lee's style, which I'll get into, I'm using the clinch game and making it as dirty as possible, because Lee is very fast. He's got very clean striking, and he's got very good movement as well. He's very good at circling, and he's got the power too. So he's very dangerous on the feet. And I think if these guys get in an exchange in boxing range, I think that Lee is going to land. I think Lee's just going to hit the mark quicker than Amil is going to be able to. And I would say that Amil's the better wrestler, but Lee is a BJJ black belt, and he has, when it comes to the clinch as well, I mean, Amil still has to be careful there, because Lee has very, very vicious knees in the clinch. and his combinations are very good when it comes to just, yeah, pressing forward, his striking output. Even when he's on the back foot, his striking is very good. He combines his strikes with a lot of good head movement. He's always moving his head from the fights that I've seen, which he has shown all of this against Blake Bilder in his last fight, and Blake Bilder is definitely no slouch. So I definitely recommend you watch that fight if you can. It definitely just showcases Lee's skills, especially on the feet. And his takedown defense too. Blake Bilder is very, very tricky when it comes to the ground, and he pretty much could not get it there at all. I think he got it there once, but Lee was able to get up pretty easily from that. And the knees were just crushing Bilder very badly when it came to those clinch knees. So yeah, Hyder Amil definitely needs to make it dirty, but he needs to be careful in this fight. And I'll say honestly, between these two, it's very close, and it's definitely one of the best fights on this card that we've got. So it's very hard to predict. And I do think someone is going to get chinned in this fight, especially with the power and the speed. So the power of Amil especially, and then the speed of Lee as well, mixing up with that power. But I'm going to be taking Lee by a KO TKO finish here. And I think that's just really going to be down to that movement, that speed. I think he's going to really be able to frustrate Amil in terms of being able to get inside. I mean, Lee's got the 3-inch reach advantage as well. He's got good straight strikes too. So yeah, I think Lee's going to be able to take Hyder Amil's O in this one. Now moving on to the main card, Dooho Choi. Yes. Versus Bill Algeo. It's good seeing Dooho Choi back. I mean, he was out for 3 years up until he fought Carl Nelson to the draw, and I find it's really sad that we just never got to see his full potential, just with the inconsistency that he had. I mean, he has only had 3 fights since he fought Cub Swanson, and that fight was 8 years ago. So he's only had three odd fights in 8 odd years. So it definitely sucks. He's one of those fighters that kind of got away. I wish we got to see a lot more of, because when he was coming up until that Cub Swanson fight, he was so dangerous. He was just piecing everyone up with the 1-2s. His right hand coming down the pipe as a 2 is vicious. It just took out everyone. And yeah, it does suck that we didn't get to see that for such a long time. And also, it's interesting to see, this is kind of like an MMA math kind of point, is Dooho Choi went to a draw with Carl Nelson, and Carl Nelson just chinned Bill Algeo in his last fight. I know MMA math doesn't always make sense, but when we look at Algeo, I will say he's got the activity. I mean, he's obviously more active than Choi. He's got the reach and he's got the submission threat there. And considering Choi was out for 3 years and then fought Kyle Nelson, the guy that just chinned Algeo, I think he handled himself extremely well in that fight, and especially on the ground as well. And he just fought someone that is, I mean, going off 3 years and then fighting someone that fights at such a high pace like Kyle Nelson is not an easy thing to do. So he's going against Bill Algeo, who's good, but does not have that same aggressive pace that Choi needs to be worried about in comparison to Kyle Nelson. And when it comes to Choi, and it comes to a lot of these other fighters, I mean, it's the last thing to go. A lot of people, I mean, most people know when it comes to fighting, the power is one of the last things to go when it comes to that like athleticism scale. And Choi has power. So he's still got it there, 100%. He's only 33. He's still in that prime age range. So I wouldn't be counting him out here. And I think if Algeo shows any form of complacency in this fight that he did against Nelson, I think he's going to be getting slept even quicker. I know that it's a substantial favorite in a sense. I can see why Bill Algeo is the favorite, but I just honestly feel like aside from possibly getting a decision win for Algeo, I think that Dooho Choi is going to get this one done. I think that he is going to be able to land that 1-2 down the pipe with Bill Algeo being complacent. It is a stretch, but honestly, I think with Dooho Choi coming off that Nelson fight and seeing how good he actually looked, for the culture, Dooho Choi is getting a KO win. 1-2 down the pipe, ground and pound finish. Now moving up to Cody Durden versus Bruno Silva. This one is definitely a tricky one to predict because when we look at them, they both have pretty similar styles, and it mainly comes down to whether Durden can effectively control Silva with his wrestling without being submitted. And I'm going to say that he can. I think that Durden can, and that mainly comes down to, just like the Maverick fight, just that clear difference in caliber of opposition. Durden has fought much better opposition, and he's had to fight out of scrambles against a lot better fighters on the ground than Bruno Silva is on the ground, like Tagir Ulanbekov, Mohammad Makayev, and you got Jake Hadley in there as well. He's no slouch either. And he fought Charles Johnson, and Charles Johnson's now on a 3-fight win streak in the UFC, literally in the UFC just this year, which I talk about in my last recap video. If you haven't seen that already, I'll leave it in the description below. And they are all just better opposition than Bruno Silva, and especially the fighters that Silva has fought in comparison. Now, I'm not all on Durden though. I'll say that when it comes to Silva, I mean, he's small, but he's very explosive. And if he can get into range and make this fight dirty, there is a possibility he could chin Durden. I know Durden hasn't been finished before, but Bruno Silva does have power, and so does Durden. So someone could get slept here without a doubt, but they are both pretty defensively sound. But Durden has the higher strike accuracy and the output compared to Silva. And he does, even though it's slight, he still does have the reach advantage, and he's just got a bigger frame in general. So I do believe that Durden can edge this one on the feet and maintain safe positions when controlling Silva on the ground. And I think with that, I think he's going to be able to get the unanimous decision win in this one. I think it will be competitive. It'll take a lot of effort from Durden, but I think Durden, just with the caliber of opposition he's faced in comparison to Bruno Silva, I think he's getting this one done. Moving up, Kurt Holobaugh versus Kaynan Kruschewsky. I think that's how you say his last name. I have no idea. Probably could have butchered it. But anyway, looking at Kaynan, he's had the exact opposite of what you want for a debut. I mean, he got flatline destroyed by Elvis Brenner late last year, where we didn't really get to see a lot from him, which is unfortunate, but he is a high-level Muay Thai fighter, and he's got a BJJ black belt, and he's finished all his wins bar 2 of them. He has looked pretty impressive on the regional scene from a couple of fights that I did see. He's got pretty clean striking, obviously hence the Muay Thai, and his submission threat is very dangerous as well. And I think this fight will be a better showing for him, not only stylistically, but he is cutting down to 155. He fought at a 165 catch weight against Elvis Brenner, which was short notice as well. So it's not really fair to judge too much off that. And I think that speed and that technical ability on the feet is just going to serve him a lot better down at 155. But that being said, the KO against him was brutal from Elvis Brenner. I mean, flat on the canvas, dead, just destroyed. And that could very much be a tell that he's not going to be coming back the same. And Holobaugh, he is a veteran, and he's looked good in his last few fights, aside from the last one against Trey Ogden. But I do think, as experienced as Kurt Holobaugh is, and very good submission game, I mean, he's just a finisher, without a doubt, 18 finishes. But I do think that Kaynan will be able to exercise that Muay Thai on the feet a lot better if he obviously comes back okay, which I'm betting on that he is going to come back okay. Now, I definitely don't see him finishing Holobaugh, but coming down from welterweight, I think the strength that he has is going to be a big factor in this fight, and I can see him edging the control in the grappling exchanges if it gets there, because he's just going to be bigger. You know, he's actually very smooth on the ground. Holobaugh is too, but I think if one of them's going to edge it, I'm going to give it to Kaynan just in terms of control options. I think just in terms of that control, I think he's going to edge it more towards the judges for himself. Now, that being said, Holobaugh, he's got the power, and if Kaynan's chin is compromised after the Brenner loss, could be night-night, without a doubt, But weighing up those options with the strong Muay Thai base and the strength moving down from welterweight, I do see him taking this one by a unanimous decision win, but I think it could be very close. Honestly, it could be a split. I wouldn't be surprised if the judges struggle on this one. Like, they struggle on a lot of fights, which they shouldn't. But this one, I genuinely think if it was a split decision here, saying it now, I wouldn't be surprised, because both of them are very good, crafty. But yeah, I think that cut down to 155 is going to serve Kaynan good. Moving up, Steve Garcia versus Seungwoo Choi. This one has banger written all over it. From an entertainment standpoint, I think this, without a doubt, honestly, is pretty much my favorite fight of this card. Steve Garcia, I mean, he is a KO freak. He has a lot of power in his hands, whether it's featherweight, whether it's lightweight, he just has a lot of power. I mean, he's taken out fighters like Chase Hooper, who is in very, very good form right now. I mean, what he did to Borshev was insane a couple months ago. And then he finished Melchizedek Costa brutally as well in his last fight. So yeah, definitely someone to watch out for moving up. He's very entertaining, and he lands at a 65% clip and has a high output in most of the fights, with most of his fights actually finishing before the third round even gets there. He's very dangerous on the feet. And then when we look at Choi, he's very fast. He's a very fast-paced fighter, very fun fighter. He's very game. I mean, he's got the power, he's got the speed as well, but he's been wobbled in a few fights, and I am a bit worried in this fight, because when he's wobbled, which makes it more entertaining, credit to him, he does not stop coming forward. He keeps coming forward, and I think that's a recipe for making this fight an absolute banger. But Steve Garcia just isn't that guy to do that with. I mean, as fun as Choi is, I see Garcia pretty much chinning him in the first round, possibly the second round against the cage. Because to beat Garcia, I think you need a very heavy wrestling / submission threat, which you can see on the screen Choi just does not have. He's 0-2 with submissions. I haven't really seen much of his wrestling game, to be honest, as well. I mean, he only succeeds in like half the takedowns that he shoots statistically, so I'm not too confident about it. And Steve Garcia, with the power that he has and the faith that he has in his striking, I think he would be drilling his takedown defense so much, especially with, you know, going off that record of 0-1 with submissions. Yeah, I think Garcia, just the more he goes up, the more prepared he's going to be for those wrestle-style fighters. But yeah, Seungwoo Choi is just not one of those guys. And honestly, I think this fun will be as fun for as long as it lasts. But yeah, that KO, TKO in the first or second round is coming. And I think we are just getting that guaranteed finish in this one. Moving up, Brad Tavares versus JeongYeong Park for our co-main event. Now, Park is the more well-rounded fighter in this matchup, but it's made a lot more tricky to actually predict because of Brad Tavares' takedown defense. I think Park will have a pretty hard time getting this fight to the ground to get that finish. But even with the striking, he does, first and foremost, Park has a boxing base, and he's more accurate, and he's got volume as well. I mean, he lands at a 60% clip, so he is accurate, and he may not have the best head movement. That's one thing that I'm not too happy about. I'm not too confident in that. So Tavares could catch him if they do exchange, but at this stage in Tavares' career, I'm just liking Park's chances overall more, to be honest. I mean, Tavares has taken so much damage in the last couple of years from the fighters that he's fought. Yes, he's fought better fighters than Park in his career, without a doubt. Honestly, he's fought the best of the best, but he's 5-5 with KOs. He's chinny. He is chinny now. He's taken so much damage. He hasn't had an actual finish on the feet in 6 years. But with that, honestly, I do think that Park's going to be able to edge this one on the feet, but I think it's going to be a decision. I think he's going to struggle to get Tavares down for that submission threat. And I think Brad Tavares is crafty enough, and he's fought better opponents that he hasn't been finished by. And I don't think Park's going to be able to take him out on the feet, but I think he's going to do a better job of landing the good shots, getting the more damage off, and I think it's just going to be in his favor for the judge's decision. But if he can, and if Park can get it to the ground, then it goes even more in his favor. And I think I don't think he'd probably submit him. I don't think he'd submit Tavares, but I think that, yeah, it's more so for his ground game, his control and everything. I think he'll be able to get Tavares out of there by unanimous decision, honestly. I think it'll be an okay fight. It's not too bad as a co-main event, but yeah, I do think that he'll be able to get this one done, and then he'll be back in that win column and be able to aim for the top 15 again. Moving on to our main event, Amanda Lemos versus Virna Jandiroba. Now, whoever wins this will most likely be set up for the next title shot. This will basically be a title eliminator after Tatiana Suarez gets to fight Weili, I'd say. And looking at Amanda Lemos, I mean, she's definitely one of the more powerful fighters in that division, without a doubt. It's kind of hard to say not. I mean, she's got the finishing threat there. She's 8-1 with KOs. And if she's going to take this, it'll be in the first or second round without a doubt. Just brain dead simple looking at both of their styles. But I don't think Lemos is gonna. I don't think Lemos is gonna win this, let alone even get another title shot. I think she's done. I think Lemos is done. I honestly believe Virna Jandiroba is either going to get the submission win, possibly pretty late, or take this by unanimous decision win, which is the one that I am going to favor. When we look at Jandiroba, I mean, she's easily one of the best ground game artists, not even in her division, in women's MMA in general. She has shut down pretty much everyone she has fought so far by very dominant control or by finishing them with the submission. I mean, she's 13-0 with submission, so that speaks for itself. And she's only been stopped by opposition who are either very strong wrestlers like Carla Esparza or grapplers like Mackenzie Dern or Amanda Hebus that have been able to outwork her. And Amanda Lemos is none of those. She's none of those. She's the exact opposite. She's the KO threat. And that just made me a lot more confident in this pick. It's all based on styles, realistically, in this fight. And Jandiroba's got a lot of momentum on her side at the moment. And one of the things that really made me pick her for this fight even more so confidently is her fight with Lucie Godinez. Now, Lucie, she is one of the cleanest boxers in the strawweight division, and Virna was pretty much able to disrupt her whole entire boxing game on the feet, pretty much 90% of her game, with her jab. Virna has a very good jab, and she just uses it to disrupt the opponent's rhythm and then gets them to the ground through, you know, the clinch. She goes through the clinch exchange and then eventually gets them down. She usually tries to take their back. And from what we've seen from Lemos and her ground game, I just see Virna being able to pretty much just take over this fight. The more and more the rounds go on, could possibly be even looking at some 10-8s towards like the fourth or the fifth round, possibly a 10-8 in there somewhere, if it goes that far, if she doesn't submit her. But granted, I will say Lemos, I'm definitely not just counting her out completely. I mean, in those first two rounds, it's Lemos's game. She could knock Virna Jandiroba out. She's never been finished, but even in the strawweight division, you wouldn't really mess with Lemos's power if you're one of those girls. So yeah, I could see that. That's definitely a possibility, but just in terms of what we're looking at here and the possibilities, yeah, the decision and the submission game is all for Virna Jandiroba. So I do think that she'll probably take the 48-47 decision in this one, with Lemos probably taking the first two rounds off of damage. And then Virna's just going to dominate the last three rounds with the control. Now, moving on to the fight card award predictions, kicking it off with fight of the night. Pretty plain and simple for me. Steve Garcia versus Dooho Choi. I mean, I said it before. Definitely the fight that I am most keen for, and I'll be very surprised if we aren't going to be getting a finish in this fight. And if Choi is game, like he usually is in his fights, it's usually very entertaining. And if his durability can hold up, then I am pretty confident we're going to be getting a war in this one. Now, moving on to performance of the night, as I said, I think Steve Garcia just has this fight pretty much played out for him. I think it's the fight for him to win, and I think that pressure and his power is just going to be too much for Choi and his durability, and I just see Garcia putting on a very entertaining performance of the night in this one. Now, moving on to the fighter to watch, I'm going to give it to JeongYeong Lee. Now, his fight with Amil will be a very decent test for him, don't get me wrong, but this guy has a lot of confidence in the cage. He has really nice hand speed, and his power as well, along with that speed, is dangerous, definitely. And I mean, I can honestly see him being one of the best performing Asian fighters that we have in the UFC at this point, and he's not old either. So yeah, definitely keen to see him moving forward. And moving on to finish of the night, last but definitely not least, Dooho Choi. I think he's going to do it for the culture. He's going to get that 1-2 straight down the pipe, get that bonus, and hopefully just get right back on track, and hopefully we can just see a lot more of him in the time that he does have left. Hopefully we get another 2-3 years out of him, and hopefully he can lay some people out. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more MMA based content, check out my last hot take video on Dustin Poirier and who I think he should fight in his last fight in his career. Just got that here on the screen, and please leave a like, comment, subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and I will hopefully catch you in the next one.